Welcome to Coffee and Astronomy. I'm Jim Craig, and one of the things I've tried to do in this particular series is to answer questions that I hear a lot, either questions people ask me, or I hear ask other astronomers, or maybe in astronomy forums. And one of those questions, especially when you've got a group of people and they say, "What power is your telescope?" Well, my telescope has multiple powers, but I will tell you that 9 times out of 10, I couldn't answer that question unless I stopped and thought about it and maybe got out a calculator, because to me, it's unimportant. And to most astronomers, it's unimportant. Magnification is a byproduct of what you want the telescope to do. If you have two stars that are close together, a poor telescope or low magnification will show you what looks like one star. And then if you use a telescope of proper aperture and that sort of thing, it will split them into two stars. They actually sometimes refer to telescopes as star splitters. And that's what a telescope does, and magnification is a byproduct of this. Now, if magnification is important to you and you want to know what it is, there is a way to calculate it by looking at your eyepiece and knowing a little bit about your telescope. My telescope is 2032 millimeter focal length, and you'll often see that. And it says f10. That's the ratio of how big around it is to how long the focal length is. So my telescope is 203.2 millimeters in diameter. We're going to round that 2000 millimeter focal length, or 2032, to 2000. The math is easier. But on the side of your eyepiece, and I have a couple eyepieces here, you may have watched the last video where I showed you two different kinds of eyepieces. I talked about them. This is one from a cheap telescope. This is a 12.5 millimeter Huygens, which means that the glass design in here was designed by astronomer Christian Huygens, and that was fine 350 years ago. This is a Plossl eyepiece. I don't know too much about the history of the Plossl eyepiece. These are high quality eyepieces, and this is 25 millimeter. So 12.5, 25. Which do you think is going to give you higher magnification? You'd probably be wrong. The higher the number is the lower magnification. So this 12.5 would give you a higher magnification, and it would look awful because it's a terrible eyepiece. This is going to give you less magnification, but if you look on the eyepiece, I'm going to try to get this so you can see it in the camera. It's 25 millimeters. It's a little hard to focus, and this camera is a fixed focus, so I can't change that. But 25 millimeter. You take the focal length of your scope, so 2000 millimeters, and divide it by the focal length of your eyepiece, 25 millimeters. In this case, that comes to 80 power. So that's the magnification you're getting. The 12.5, that would be 160 power. And I do have a very nice 12.5 millimeter Plossl that I can use. Give me, again, better view. Now, one of the things that's going to happen when you magnify is you're going to see the limitations of your telescope, because you're not just magnifying the object you want to look at, you're magnifying everything that's wrong with your telescope. You're also magnifying the turbulence of the atmosphere. You're magnifying a lot more, again, than just the object you want to look at. And one way to know how much maximum magnification you can get, there's actually a physics principle behind it, called the Dawes limit. It's D-A-W-E-S. And you figure for every 25 millimeters of aperture of your telescope, or every inch, so say you have a 3-inch telescope, you can get about 50 power for every inch. So a 3-inch telescope, you can maximum get 150 power. And often those 3-inch refractors you see sold in the big box stores and department stores, they'll brag 750 power. And yeah, you can push that much magnification out of it, and you're going to get 750 power of garbage because it's not going to look very good. Now, with I'm going to use a calculator here because it's a little early and only a little coffee. So I have an 8-inch scope times 50. Oh, it's easy. Again, don't understand. Maximum power I can expect to get out of my telescope is 400 power. Again, I generally won't use that kind of magnification because it's not necessary. It helps with planets. but that is really not necessary. And that's one of the reasons that people want the big aperture telescopes, 8, 10, 200 inches. That's why they build the large telescope, is because you can get a higher magnification and higher resolution. You can see more detail of smaller things. And we do, there's a whole lot to say about resolution that's beyond anything I want to say here. So when I was talking about aiming with your scope, first find it in your finder scope. Then with your main scope, use your lowest power eyepiece. I generally start with a 40 millimeter eyepiece, so running about 50 power. And I get it centered in that eyepiece. Then I'll put in a higher power eyepiece, say the 25 millimeter or the 12.5 millimeter. Get it centered in that. There's also a way of essentially doubling up your eyepieces by buying one accessory called a Barlow lens. And a Barlow lens, I don't have one here, but it fits between, it goes over your eyepiece and then goes into your telescope. And depending on the magnification of your Barlow, sometimes you'll see 3x, sometimes you'll see 2x. It will double, triple. There are even higher power Barlows. I've never used one. I have a triple power Barlow. So if I'm looking at something 50 power and I put in that Barlow, it's suddenly 150 power and I haven't had to change really anything. And when I do my planetary astrophotography, I always put in a Barlow lens because that gives me a larger image to work with, gives me more photons to process, and I wind up with better looking pictures instead of trying to do it, because people will often say, well, gee, Mars is a little tiny ball or Jupiter's is a little tiny dot. And if you use a Barlow, it can help that. But again, remember, you're magnifying the junk between you and whatever it is you're looking at. And that junk can be your eyepiece, or it can be your eyepiece, it can be your objective lens, or it can be the atmosphere. So start with low power, go higher power, and if things start to look kind of wonky, back off, go to that lower power. Whatever eyepiece you use, don't worry about what its power is. Just make sure it's giving you the sharpest, clearest, brightest image that you can see, and you're going to have a great time doing astronomy. If you enjoy seeing me with Coffee and Astronomy, or the talks I do with Coffee and Astronomy, consider becoming a patron. For as little as $1 a month, you can help keep these videos coming. I do special offers just for my patrons. This time I've got special wallpaper of some astrophotography that I've done, one of the Orion Nebula, and then wallpaper of lunar mosaic that I did, picture of the moon. And for as little as $1 a month, you can get that. At the $5 level, I will custom size that for you so you don't have to do it yourself, any size you want. So head on over to patreon.com, Planet of Mystery. That's patreon.com/planet_of_mystery. So I hope to see you there, and hope to see you again here sometime soon. This is Jim Craig with Coffee and Astronomy telling you, get out and enjoy the sky.